My name is Dr. Elias Vance. To the world, I am the epitome of calm, competence, and care. My practice, Aura Dental, is tucked away on the quietest block of the city's financial district, a sanctuary of polished marble and diffused light. When patients walk in, they breathe a sigh of relief, often commenting on the serenity of the place. That feeling of absolute safety is, quite frankly, my greatest asset. I excel at my work. My hands are steady, my smile is sincere, and my words are always soothing. "You're in the best of hands, Mrs. Thorne," I'd murmur, adjusting the tilt of the leather chair. The moment that bright, circular light flips on above their face, shining down like a small, isolated sun, the world outside ceases to exist for them. They are vulnerable, exposed, and utterly trusting. And that, of course, is when the real work begins. My tools, the gleam of the stainless steel, the low mechanical whine of the drill, they are not merely instruments of correction. They are extensions of my will. They are precise, effective, and utterly silent in their true purpose. The anesthesia I administer is perfectly measured to ensure not just comfort, but a deep, untraceable slumber. The disappearances started subtly, as these things always do. Mr. Jeffrey Mills, a tedious man obsessed with his receding gums, was the first. His appointment was at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday. He reclined in the chair, spoke about his daughter's wedding, and then he was gone. No fuss, no struggle, just the silent, meticulous application of my craft. When I was done, I perfected his teeth, repositioning them with a delicate touch. A final, fixed, unsettlingly wide smile, my signature, my little secret joke with the universe. When his wife called 2 days later, I answered the phone with just the right mix of professional concern and mild surprise. "Oh, Mr. Mills, he simply completed his checkup and left. He mentioned something about an urgent business trip out of town, didn't he? I merely tidied up a stubborn crown for him." My voice was a flawless velvet lie. They never suspect the one who promises to fix their smile is the one who steals their breath. The local news finally caught the scent of a pattern, a string of gone-without-a-trace cases that all had a single chilling commonality: a recent visit to a highly rated, highly trusted dental office. My office. But the police treat me like a witness, a respected pillar of the community, not a suspect. They look at my calm face, the immaculate records, the pristine waiting room, and they see no monster. They don't see the silent roar of the drill. They don't hear the choked sound that only the thick, reinforced walls of my chamber absorb. And they certainly don't see the perfect, ghastly grin I leave behind. I adjust my cufflinks, smile warmly at my next patient, a young woman clutching a magazine, and think, another one ready for a permanent solution. My life is a perfectly balanced equation. Prestige plus precision equals power. The ritual of it all is deeply satisfying. The meticulous sterilization of the tools, the calming music, Baroque, always Baroque, and the gentle, reassuring lies I feed my patients. But lately there has been a variable I failed to account for. Ilara. Ilara is my new dental assistant. She replaced the last one, a flighty girl who worried too much about her weekend plans to notice the beautiful silence of my work. Ilara is different. She is unnervingly attentive. Her eyes, a sharp shade of gray, seem to take in everything, lingering just a fraction too long on the disposal unit after an intensive procedure, or on the impeccable cleanliness of the floor where there should perhaps be a stray drop of something. The city's noise about the missing persons hasn't ceased. If anything, the whispers are getting louder. I hear the low murmur of police consultation coming from the reception area sometimes, and I simply increase the volume of the Baroque to drown it out. The police still see me as the sympathetic professional, but I see the doubt creeping into Ilara's posture. Just yesterday, I completed a particularly satisfying session. The patient, an obnoxious lawyer named Mr. Sterling, left the chair with a magnificent new smile, a smile of eternal gratitude. After Mr. Sterling departed, through the discreet rear exit, of course, as per the standard protocol for post-surgical recovery, I was carefully wiping down the tray when Alara spoke. "Dr. Vance," she said, her voice quiet but clear. "Mr. Sterling's chart shows we only performed a routine filling, nothing that required quite so many implements, or that particular anesthetic dose." I paused, my hand steady on the silver pliers. "Ah, Alara. You must remember Mr. Sterling suffers from extreme dental anxiety. I find a slightly deeper, more complete sedation is necessary to ensure the best results and, more importantly, a perfectly still canvas for my work." I turned, giving her my most reassuring, most expensive smile. "We must prioritize the patient's comfort above all, mustn't we?" She didn't return the smile. She simply looked at the pliers, then at the empty chair, and finally back at me, her gray eyes holding a quiet, unnerving knowledge. "Of course, doctor. But I also noticed the inventory is short one set of those extraction forceps, the long, narrow ones, the ones you rarely use for fillings." That was the first crack. A tiny, almost imperceptible line across the flawless porcelain of my facade. She was counting. She was observing the minute details. I felt a surge of cold irritation, quickly masked. "Good observation, Alara," I conceded smoothly. "I sent them off with the contaminated waste for emergency disposal this morning. They were slightly warped. We must maintain the highest standards of equipment quality after all." She simply nodded and returned to sterilizing the suction tubes, but the air in the chamber had changed. It was no longer a sanctuary of trust. It was a tight, silent arena. I realize now that keeping my perfect mask intact will require more effort, and perhaps a permanent solution for the sharp-eyed assistant who is beginning to see more than she should. Alara had become a splinter under my fingernail, a constant nagging distraction. Her quiet skepticism was a corrosive acid on my perfect facade. I could feel her eyes on me, not with admiration or trust, but with cold, calculating suspicion. I knew what needed to be done. A weakness in the system must be extracted. I scheduled her for a private training session after hours on a Friday. I told her we needed to run through the new inventory system. She arrived promptly, her gray eyes sharper than usual, her posture tense. She knew this wasn't about inventory. She was intelligent enough for that. She walked into the sterile, softly lit chamber, my sanctuary, my hunting ground, and her fear was a palpable thing, a delicious scent in the air. "Dr. Vance," she started, her voice a little shaky. "I feel I must be honest. The way Mr. Sterling left, the missing forceps, it doesn't add up." I didn't answer right away. I was already at the storage cabinet retrieving the exact dose of fast-acting sedative, a much larger dose than any routine procedure required. I turned, letting the overhead light catch the wicked sheen of the steel. My smile was not the professional, reassuring one I sold to the world. It was wide, genuine, and utterly terrifying. It was the mirror image of the final smiles I left on my patients. "You are absolutely correct, Alara," I purred, my voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial murmur. "It doesn't add up for a dentist, but it adds up perfectly for an artist obsessed with symmetry and silence." Her eyes widened in horror. She tried to bolt for the door, but I was faster. I had spent years mastering control, precision, and quick, decisive movements. I caught her wrist, the sedative-filled syringe flashing in the low light. She fought, a desperate, silent struggle against my methodical strength. She was surprisingly resilient, managing to knock the tray of instruments, scattering them across the polished floor with a deafening clatter. The syringe found its mark. Her struggle instantly weakened, replaced by the heavy, leaden slump of resignation. I eased her into the chair, adjusting the neck cradle with practiced tenderness. The light flashed on above her face, making her pupils dilate. The sight of her helpless, trusting position filled me with a deep, dark satisfaction. "You were a very clever girl, Alara," I whispered, picking up my favorite pair of pliers. "Too clever. You see, the point is not just to correct a smile. The point is to make that smile permanent, unchanging, a masterpiece of eternal silence." I worked with swift surgical focus. The sounds of the drill and the delicate snaps of bone were muffled only by the reinforced walls. When I was finished, I stepped back. The chair held another perfect, ghastly grin, a beautiful, fixed testament to my artistic control. I cleaned the chamber meticulously, leaving no trace, no misplaced drop of blood, no broken tool. I erased the security footage and wiped down every surface. When I finally locked the heavy oak door and stepped out into the night, I was once again Dr. Elias Vance, the composed, successful, and perfectly ordinary dentist. The city continued to buzz with the missing person cases, but the police were stumped. They interviewed me again regarding my assistant, Alara. I sighed, running a tired hand through my hair. "It's so unlike her," I told the detective earnestly. "She was a bright girl, very reliable. She must have just needed a change of scenery. Perhaps the stress was too much. I only gave her a glowing recommendation, a final checkup, and wished her well." I smiled, a sincere, flawless, professional smile. It was the only mask I would ever need. And as I walked away, I felt nothing but the quiet, clean satisfaction of a job well done. The secrets of the silent, smiling dead remained perfectly safe within the walls of Aura Dental. I always found comfort in the scent of Dr. Eris Thorne's office. It wasn't the antiseptic sting you usually associate with dentists. His practice, the Crest, smelled faintly of peppermint and expensive leather. It was a boutique kind of clean, reassuring, and utterly trustworthy. Dr. Thorne was, quite simply, the cornerstone of our small, affluent community, the man who guaranteed our smiles. He was a master of his craft, quick, precise, and genuinely warm. His hands, I remember, were steady, his eyes full of a calming, focused intensity. Every patient who left his chair felt the same thing, a sense of profound relief, a little dazzle from the overhead light, and the quiet assurance that, for an hour at least, they had been in the absolute safest place on earth. You'd close your eyes, open your mouth, and mentally sign away all your worries. "He's the best," we'd all agree over coffee at the local bakery. A real artist. I had my annual cleaning done on a chilly Tuesday morning in late October. Dr. Thorne leaned over me, his face close, his voice a low, soothing murmur as he told me about a new ultrasonic polisher. Everything was routine, perfect. As I left, he gave me his signature closing line, the one that always made me smile. "Nothing to worry about, Alara. We took care of everything." His smile was wide, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He was the picture of wellness, of competency, of unwavering health. The first crack in our collective assurance came a week later. It was old Mr. Silas, the retired history professor who lived 2 doors down from me. He was known for his robust health and his long walks. One morning, he was fine. By the next evening, he was gone. It wasn't a stroke or a heart attack. The doctors at the city hospital were baffled. They vaguely called it an aggressive systemic failure, suggesting a freak, hyperacute viral infection, but they couldn't identify the pathogen. It was a strange, silent passing. We grieved, of course, and spoke of the randomness of life. Then, 2 days after Mr. Silas's funeral, young Maya from the bookshop, barely 30, was admitted to the ICU with the exact same mysterious symptoms: rapid onset, high fever, organ shutdown. She died within 12 hours. Suddenly, the deaths weren't random anymore. They were connected by something invisible and terrifying. The town whispered about a silent plague, or maybe even environmental toxins. Everyone was looking for a shared thread: the water, the air, the new restaurant downtown. But I, lying in bed late that night, staring at my reflection in the window, kept thinking of Dr. Thorne, of his meticulous office, and of the one tiny detail that everyone, the police and the doctors included, was ignoring. I remember running into Mr. Silas just outside the Crest the week before he died. Maya, too, had mentioned her perfect checkup on Monday. The realization hit me with the force of a cold drill against bone. It wasn't the air or the water that connected them. It was the chair. The pristine, beautiful, trusted chair where we all opened our mouths and, in silent faith, handed over our lives. The man we all trusted, the gentle doctor with the reassuring smile, was the only common denominator. And I had been his patient just days ago. The knowledge was a cold lump of lead in my stomach. Dr. Thorne. Not a random tragedy, but a calculated, invisible crime. The minute I realized it, my life fractured. The world didn't look like peppermint and leather anymore. It looked like a sterile, lethal trap. I couldn't go to the police. How could I say, the best dentist in the state is using his instruments to murder people with an unknown supervirus? They'd think I was grieving, paranoid, or simply unwell. I had to find a thread, a single piece of evidence that wasn't just coincidence. My investigation began with a sick kind of devotion. I started checking the local obituary notices and cross-referencing them with neighborhood chat groups. Within 3 days, I had a list of 7 recent inexplicable deaths. All the victims were active, middle-aged, or older members of our close-knit community. And yes, every single one was a patient of Dr. Thorne, having had a procedure within 2 weeks of their illness. The pattern was solid, but the evidence was zero. I needed to get inside. My excuse came when I called his office, feigning severe sensitivity and a molar. His receptionist, a sweet older woman named Bethany, got me an appointment for the next afternoon. As soon as I hung up, my hands were shaking. I was willingly walking back into the lion's den. The next day, sitting in his waiting room, I felt every nerve scream. When Dr. Thorne called my name, his smile was as bright and assuring as always. "Back so soon, Alara? Don't worry, it won't hurt a bit," he murmured, that familiar phrase now sounding like a dark, perverse promise. I sat in the chair, but I didn't close my eyes this time. While he bent over my mouth, preoccupied with tools, I discreetly watched. My target wasn't his hands. It was the side counter where he kept the sterile trays. When he reached for a specific instrument, a small, sharp scaler, I saw it. Underneath the pristine white cloth covering the tray, there was a tiny, almost imperceptible dark stain on the stainless steel surface of the cabinet. It looked like a drop of dried blood that had somehow been missed. My blood or Silas's or Maya's. It didn't matter. It was my only chance. As he turned to rinse his gloved hands at the sink, I did the unthinkable. My heart hammering against my ribs, I quickly reached into my purse, pulled out a small, sterile plastic zip bag I'd prepared, and scraped the corner of the surface with my thumbnail, catching a small, dusty flake of the dried matter. It took 1 second. Just as I tucked the bag into my pocket, he turned back. He paused, not quite looking at me, but at the empty space beside my chair. The smile was still there, but it was thinner now, a little too fixed. "Everything all right, Alara? You seem a little jumpy today." I forced a casual laugh. "Just nervous about the drilling, doctor. You know how it is." He didn't drill. He simply cleaned the area and applied a desensitizing gel, sending me home with a suggestion for a follow-up. But as I hurried out of his office, I felt his eyes boring into my back. That brief moment of awkward silence had confirmed my fear. He knew something was wrong. I rushed the sample to an old medical school acquaintance, a pathologist named Dr. Hemlock, promising him an impossible story and begging for secrecy. The call came late that night. Hemlock's voice was strained, the clinical neutrality gone. "Alara, this isn't any known pathogen. It's a bioengineered hybrid. It targets the heart and liver, and it's aggressive. I think you were right." Relief was instantly replaced by a fresh wave of terror. By talking to Hemlock, I had broadened the circle of danger, and I had left a trail. 2 hours later, a news bulletin flashed on my screen. Dr. Eris Thorne's dental office, the crest, was engulfed in flames. Not an accident. The fire department immediately suspected arson. He was erasing the evidence. He was cleaning the one piece of stained steel I had missed. And now he knew I was the one who had taken the sample. I was no longer a curious patient, I was a target. The fire at the crest was his declaration of war. It wasn't just arson, it was a scorched earth policy meant to incinerate every shred of proof and every last doubt. Dr. Thorne was not a panicked man, he was meticulously eliminating witnesses. I knew that the pathologist, Dr. Hemlock, was now in as much danger as I was. I called Hemlock immediately, giving him one instruction. Run. Take the sample, go to the federal lab 3 states away, and leak the findings to the press if he didn't hear from me by morning. That done, I was alone, clutching the tiny zip bag with the dried biological material, the ghost of his crimes. I had to confront him. The police would move too slowly, and every hour I waited meant another life he could end, perhaps his own, taking the truth with him. I drove to his large, isolated home outside of town. The lights were on, casting long, still shadows across the immaculate lawn. He was waiting. I walked right up to the front door and knocked. A minute later, Dr. Thorne opened it. He wasn't wearing scrubs or a lab coat. He was in a crisp, dark sweater, the picture of a grieving professional man. But his eyes, they held a cold, flat emptiness that chilled me more than the virus. The smile was gone. "Ilara," he said, his voice level. "I suppose you're here about the unfortunate accident at my office." "I'm here about Silas and Maya and the other 5, I countered, my voice shaking despite my best effort. I held up the zip bag. "And I'm here about this. Your cleanup wasn't as perfect as your bedside manner." He didn't panic. He simply stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come in. Let's discuss dental hygiene and conspiracy theories, shall we?" The conversation in his opulent living room was the most horrifying part of the entire ordeal. He didn't deny it. He explained it. His motive was a twisted, self-proclaimed form of natural selection. He believed the community had grown weak, soft, and undeserving of his care. He had synthesized the pathogen during a period of disillusioned scientific research, seeing himself as a sort of cosmic editor, pruning the unfit from the herd. It was elegant, he stated, admiring his own genius. A single, almost imperceptible needle prick, a drop of blood mixed with the culture in the sterile rinse, then back into the tray. They left smiling, believing they were safe. The infection was the ultimate irony. I stood my ground, my hand trembling inside my coat pocket, clutching my phone. "You killed them because you think you're better than them." "I proved I am," he corrected, his lips twitching in a grotesque parody of his old smile. "And you, Ilara, have proven yourself to be a liability." He took a slow step towards me. That was the moment I enacted my final, desperate plan. As he moved, I shouted, "You already infected me, haven't you? It's too late." He stopped, momentarily startled. "What?" "The molar heiress," I lied, using his first name for the first time. "The procedure yesterday, I felt it, the slight burn of the culture. You wanted to watch me panic, didn't you?" A flicker of genuine doubt crossed his face. His arrogance, his need for control, was his weakness. He had to be sure. He lunged for my arm, demanding to see the area I had claimed to feel the burn. This was my chance. I sidestepped, pulling out my phone, which was secretly filming our interaction. I didn't try to escape. Instead, I hurled the evidence bag across the room. "It's over," I yelled. "The original sample is in transit to the federal government, and this conversation is being recorded." He ignored the phone, his attention fixed on the zip bag skittering across the floor. He lunged for it, desperate to destroy the last piece of the viral puzzle. As he scrambled, his foot snagged the heavy leg of a glass coffee table. The noise was deafening. The table crashed, sending shards of thick glass exploding outward. Dr. Thorne cried out, clutching his head, a line of crimson blooming instantly against his immaculate white rug. But the final irony came not from me, but from his own poisoned tools. Hidden beneath the fallen table, a small sterilized metal tray, one he must have brought from the clinic, had been resting. As he fell, the tray scattered, and a sharply pointed syringe, meant for his final private acts, punctured his sweater and pierced his arm. He looked down at the needle sticking out of his skin, then up at me, his eyes finally wide with genuine terrified realization. He hadn't just destroyed the evidence. He had armed his own demise. I didn't call the police then. I simply retrieved my phone, walked out the front door, and waited for the wail of the sirens. As I sat on the curb, watching the dawn break, I knew the community would eventually understand the truth. The very man who promised to take care of everything had been slowly, subtly, and with devastating confidence, extracting their lives. And for me, every comforting smile from a stranger now carried the weight of a terrible, lingering doubt. The world was clean again, but the trust I knew was gone forever. The moment the main doors of the Harmony Dental Clinic locked behind the last nurse, the place changed. During the day, it was bright, smelling of mint and disinfectant, a place of forced cheerfulness. But at night, under the low emergency lighting, the long, sterile corridors became tunnels of cold silence. My job, as the overnight security guard Marcus, was simple. Patrol every hour, check the locks, and make sure no one broke in. What I quickly realized was that my biggest challenge wasn't keeping people out, but dealing with whatever was left inside. It started subtly, maybe 2 weeks into my new routine. I was sitting at the front desk, watching the monitors, when I heard the unmistakable click of a switch. I froze, listening. Nothing. I checked the screen showing the main sterilization room. Empty. But as I watched, the automatic light over the metal instrument tray flickered, then stayed on. Just for a second, a pool of stark white light illuminated the rows of gleaming steel instruments, and then it was dark again. Just a glitch in the old wiring, I told myself. But the wiring issues escalated. One night during my patrol, I walked past the row of dental chairs. The chairs were low, tilted slightly, waiting for the morning's torture. As I passed the second one, I heard a soft, whirring sound. It was the sound of a table-mounted dental tool, a polisher maybe, or a fine drill being activated. I stopped dead. The sound was faint, barely audible, as if the machine was trying to start but couldn't quite manage it. I flipped on the room lights. The chair was empty. The tray was still. I inspected the machine's power cord, its settings, everything was off. My flashlight beam danced over the polished steel. When I backed away, turning the room light off again, the whirring returned, seeming to follow me down the empty hallway. Soon the staff began to notice. The morning crew complained about finding equipment slightly moved, as if someone had been using it overnight. The light in Dr. Choi's private office would sometimes be found on, though he swore he'd locked up in the dark. The whispers began with the patients. A little girl, tears streaming down her face, insisted she saw a dark shadow standing near the back wall during her filling. An elderly woman described seeing a pair of glowing eyes reflected in the stainless steel basin while she waited for the rinse. The rumor spread like a highly contagious fever. The dental clinic is haunted. Some said the ghost was a patient who had died unexpectedly in the chair years ago. Others claimed it was the spirit of a disgruntled assistant, taking a dark, spectral form of revenge. But the one that always sent a chill through me was the most specific and terrifying. The faint sound of the drill was the ghost tearing teeth from its own jaw, forever locked in a nightmarish dental appointment. The fear was real. Appointments were canceled. People began driving to the next town for checkups. The clinic, once a symbol of perfect hygiene, was now viewed as a place of dread and potential infection, not from disease, but from a growing unseen malevolence. I was the only person who spent the full dark night there. I saw the lights flicker. I heard the phantom drill. I knew the rumors were true in some form, and the fear had gotten its hook into me. But I had a suspicion that this wasn't an angry spirit. It felt too deliberate, too focused. As I walked the empty halls, I started to wonder if something worse than a ghost was at work. Something cleverer and far more human. The haunting wasn't random. It was scheduled. That's the first thing I realized. The flickering lights always happened around midnight. The phantom whirring of the drill always followed my 2 a.m. patrol. A ghost shouldn't have a schedule. A person with a plan does. My job title was security guard, but now I was an amateur detective, navigating the quietest, creepiest crime scene in town. I started a secret log. Every anomaly, every flicker, every misplaced instrument, I wrote it down, creating a timeline that showed deliberate, almost theatrical timing. I began focusing my patrols not on the outside of the building, but on the hidden infrastructure inside. I spent one tense night crawling through the dusty utility tunnels beneath the floorboards, shining my flashlight onto the tangle of pipes and wires. I found nothing. Then, the rumors shifted. Dr. Choi was getting desperate. The fear was crippling his practice. He'd even brought in a medium who declared the place infested with negative energy. The staff was divided. Half believed the ghost story, the other half, the smarter half, were quietly looking at each other, wondering who among them was crazy enough to pull such a stunt. I finally found the first clue in the room where the sound always started. The second dental chair. I knew the sound wasn't coming from the drill itself, which was inert. It was coming from behind the wall panel next to the chair. After forcing the cover plate off with a screwdriver, I found it. A small, battery-operated speaker, expertly taped to the inside of the plasterboard. It was connected to a hidden wire leading to a compartment containing a small digital recorder with a loop of the drill's whirring sound. I felt a surge of cold fury. This wasn't supernatural. This was malice. My focus immediately shifted to motive. Who had access? Who had the technical skill? And who stood to gain from ruining Dr. Choi's reputation? I spent the next 2 days watching the clinic's former employees list. My eyes landed on one name, Sylvester, a sterilization technician who had been fired 6 months earlier for sloppiness and stealing supplies. Sylvester had a background in electronics. He fixed arcade games on the side, and he was notoriously vindictive. My mind raced. The flickering lights? I found a tiny, almost invisible remote-controlled switch taped inside the ceiling access panel controlling the main breaker. The shadow on the wall? I searched the roof access and found a low-powered projector hidden inside a chimney vent, angled to cast a distorted shape onto the main corridor wall right before the dawn. Sylvester wasn't just creating a haunting. He was engineering a total mental breakdown of the clinic, piece by terrifying piece. That evening, I set my trap. I told Dr. Choi I was taking a sick day, but I actually hid inside a rarely used supply closet overlooking the main entrance hallway, armed with nothing but my flashlight and a phone camera. I knew Sylvester would be back to check his haunting and possibly move his equipment. Around 1 a.m., the lock on the back door clicked. A dark figure slipped inside. It was Sylvester. He moved through the clinic with practiced ease, his flashlight beam dancing across the walls. He went straight for the dental chairs, preparing his spectacle for the night. I watched, my heart pounding, as he adjusted the speaker's timer. This was it. The ghost was caught. The truth was about to come out. I burst out of the closet, shining my light directly into his face. "Game over, Sylvester," he cried out, dropping his bag of wires and timers, his face contorted in a mix of shock and rage. The silence of the clinic was finally broken by a real human scream. I had proven the haunting was a hoax. The ghost was a disgruntled man, and the terror was a calculated act of revenge. But as I stood over the stunned, defeated technician, a strange, creeping chill ran up my spine. The shadow on the wall, the one the little girl had seen, was far taller, far darker than Sylvester's small frame could ever cast. I had found the human culprit, but as I glanced at the quiet, empty hallway, I couldn't shake the feeling that my flashlight had only illuminated half of the truth. I stood over Sylvester, the drill's whirring silenced, the shadows banished by my flashlight. The relief should have been immense, but the chill I felt wasn't from the cold night air. It was the realization that the simple, human explanation, revenge, didn't quite cover the depth of the terror we had all experienced. The police arrived quickly. Sylvester, defeated and pathetic, confessed everything. He described using timers to click the lights, small recorders for the whirring sound, and even admitted to rigging a pulley system for a crude shadow puppet effect in the main corridor. The community, once riddled with fear, breathed a collective sigh of relief. The clinic was professionally cleaned, the haunting was declared a hoax, and Dr. Choi gave a press conference assuring everyone that the dental chairs were perfectly safe. My job was supposedly done. The supernatural had been debunked, and the mundane criminal was locked away. But the silence that followed the removal of Sylvester's devices was heavier, not lighter. The clinic was supposed to feel normal again. Instead, it felt empty. Too empty. I agreed to stay on for another week of night shifts just to monitor the transition. On the fourth night, I was sitting at the front desk, reviewing the security camera footage. It was 3:15 a.m., hours after Sylvester's scheduled performance time. I was watching a feed from the main treatment room, the one with the notorious second chair. The room was absolutely pitch black. I had turned off all the main lights after my patrol. As I leaned closer to the monitor, a tiny, almost imperceptible detail caught my eye: the reflection in the polished chrome of the main dental tray. It wasn't a shadow or a flicker of light from the outside. It was a shape, a distorted, dark mass sitting perfectly upright in the middle of the empty dental chair. It had a strange, hunched posture, and where the mouth should have been, the reflection showed a long, deep streak of darkness, like a gaping void. I snatched up my flashlight and sprinted down the hallway, my heart hammering a chaotic rhythm against my ribs. I threw open the door to the treatment room, blinding white light flooding the space. The chair was empty. Perfectly empty. I checked the whole room, frantic now, searching for any hidden wire, any device, any reflection I had missed. There was nothing. Sylvester was in jail. His projector was in an evidence bag. This was a genuine anomaly, a violation of the laws of optics and sanity. As I backed out of the room, my eyes lingering on that empty, silent chair, I heard it. A sound that was neither a whirring recorder nor a human scream. It was a faint, sharp clink, like a tiny instrument had fallen onto a porcelain basin in the absolute quiet. I quickly looked over the counter where the rinse basins were kept. They were clean, dry, and untouched. I finished my shift that night, but I never went back to the Harmony Dental Clinic. I never told Dr. Choi or the police what I saw, knowing the human truth was all they needed. Sylvester's hoax had ruined the clinic's reputation, but it had also, perhaps inadvertently, drawn attention to something else, something that had been there all along. The whole town believed the ghost was caught. They believed the terror was explained. But I know what I saw in that perfect, empty chrome reflection. The lie was exposed, but the fear was not. And sometimes when I pass by the darkened building late at night, I swear I can still see, briefly through the window, the faint outline of a hunchbacked shadow patiently waiting in the dental chair, perhaps finally ready to finish the appointment that Sylvester's little game had interrupted.